He had yet to remove his mantle of gold, that cold certainty of judgment that weighed on his mind like a heavy crown. He needed it to stay calm with the revelation of how many had arrived. 70,000 ships in his system, and a new keep needing to be constructed to house all the attendees of the moot. No war rations could be accumulated in such conditions, his world practically being stripped bare as those locusts ate all his crops. It was unfortunate his ally would be displeased, but understanding, not feeding guests, would violate their rights, and even now he owed the Exodus, Lord Wergogild, for his assistance. Debts were unfortunate things, and he loathed them. 70,000 ships. There were not enough Exodite ships in existence to match that number, even if they sent everything they had, which means there were non-Exodites in his system, and in the moot, something he was hoping to avoid entirely. Merchant princes and core world refugees coming in civilian ships and eating his food stores and generally being a nuisance on his planet. What use were merchants and refugees in a war effort? Nothing. They traded for exotic souls and slaves. They busied themselves with tortures and pleasure machines. Worthless fools that never fought a day in their lives. Worthless bodies eating his food and complaining about the quality and contributing nothing because they knew nothing of actual work. He ground his teeth, keeping his red anger shackled in chains of gold. Much as he despised them, Roboute wanted to help as many as possible, claiming they can learn. Asenil doubted this. They walked a worthless life road, and they had been walking it for a long time. Deviating from it would be difficult for all, impossible for some. Just like them, Roboute had been walking his life road for too long. Deviation would be nearly impossible for him, even if they could afford it. A Twilight King, lord of a crumbling empire, too used to using everything possible in desperation to keep his people alive and united even a year longer. A statue, stone flesh wearing away from metal bones. He could not see that his arrival on Charnak had changed his legend. He wasn't a Twilight King anymore. He was a Dawn Prince now. He could afford to cut away less useful things and keep only the good to build the strongest foundations of his empire and for himself. He could afford to live instead of merely surviving. Asanil would persist in his efforts regardless. This white cycle was only possible by Roboute's arrival. He owed it to his friend to ensure that he enjoys life. Now he just needed to help stern-eyed Miriel seduce him. But how would he go about that? Roboute had been too relaxed to notice her persistent stare during the massage. Dragon Lord, it is time for the moot. Wretched Savan decided to interrupt his silver scheming with a reminder that Asanil had duties as a host. Duties to wretched Fushir, guests that eat all his food and most likely spent all their years before the forewarned calamity strapped and thrashing on tables. Mindless animal eld being nuked for their sensations. Savan should have fed them to the dragons, or at least sent them away, not offer them guest rights. Gold weighed on his brow, making his stand and nod expressionless. Donning the cloak of a dragon lord, he pushed from his chambers and moved to enter the webway as it formed in front of him. A step later, he was in the ugly new fortress on his favorite mountain, and Savan close behind him. Another step later, and the temporary gate behind him closed, and an escort of his dragon knights stepped forwards to flank him along his way. 10 more steps, and he was at the entrance of the massive moot hall hastily constructed for this exact occasion. 10,000 speaking eld in that chamber, at least half of which he would rather not have on his nice world. There used to be bare, beautiful mountain here, and the sun would hit this side perfectly in the evenings of winter, and now that was gone for some massive, ungainly fortress that he wouldn't need after this. His brow twitched in red. The inevitable jaws of certain death touched his mind in white-green. He returned the touch with gold-red, and his companion understood. He breathed in heavily, then out again, and stepped through the gates. The massive, gaudy chamber was large enough to fit a 10-circle of knights in its innermost stage, circled by ring after ring of seating that extended upwards for hundreds of feet. Enough seating for tens of thousands, in a chamber that he could do little else but host theatre in hereafter. He thought he was done with theatre when he joined the Exodus, fleet and left the core worlds behind him. And of course, filling the first several rings of seating were 10,000 eld. About half of which he would prefer were not here. In the seating, directly adjacent to the theatre circle, were the figures of particular note. Robut was there, his presentations next to him at Reddit. Malekith Malorn was there, standing as titanically as any Prince of Eld ought, Lord Commander of the Exodus fleet. A full 6 of his fellow Dragon Lords. A figure he did not recognize, and there were the rest of them, a handful of merchant princes, a handful of core world princes, and several others he assumed were equally worthless. Highest honored among degenerates and slavers was lowest honored among heroes. Their most noble members were likely their toy makers. None of that now, Asanil. You had to speak with these creatures now. First was the formalities. Stepping to the center of the theater circle, he stood straight, cast his gaze among the assembled Eld, and focused his mind to project his voice. Even through the aegis of Charnak's spirit, he could feel the fuchsia stare of she who thirsts upon him. He sneered at it, a crown of weighty gold holding down his burning red. His sword art twitched. It did not have the right to exist in his sight. Gathered Eld, he began, voice powerful and carrying throughout the chamber with admittedly well-done acoustics. Now begins this moot of calamities. Some of the fatter ones twitched and sneered at that. By declaring a moot of calamities, he declared that this moot would not be delayed for any reason, such as food or drink. Serve the locust right, and he would get this with faster. I am Asanil, once Calador, Dragon Lord of Charnak, 4-crowned master of the bloody-handed arts, a warrior of greater experience than any save his fellow Exodite kings. Some of the refugee princes looked confused by that declaration. The fools forgot the old ways, it seems. He could crush them with 3 of his fingers and a stern glare. He supposed it would be best to get right to the point. Isha lives. A ripple of discussion and emotions washed over the chamber. Savan reinforced the world spirit just in time for Fuchsia to clash against it. After a few moments, the tide receded, and he could begin speaking again. Did they forget their golden mantles? Worthless. Bound in the garden of the parasite. Bastard. He had to give applause to Robut. His various names for the Lord of Flies were absolute artistry. Calling the one who styled himself a loving father, a bastard that sunders loving houses through unending consumption, was quite a well-struck blow. He would naturally steal it in a shameless manner, bound and tormented, but alive. Isha is alive. It is our duty as her children to rescue and defend her. He left no room for disagreement with his declaration. It is our duty to carve a red path through that bilesome heap, pull her from it, and preserve her against she who thirsts. We can do nothing less. Then why do we delay? Merchant Prince in red, black and white shouted out. Why do we wait while she lies in torment? How many of the assembled are warriors? Asanil questioned. How many among you are warriors and not toy makers? Not painters, not merchants, not poets, not performers. Warriors. Only a third stood. The majority of them were Exodites. To his credit, the merchant prince remained standing, a clave at his hip. He looked around, though, and frowned in grim black before sitting down once more. We have not the number of warriors required, not only to face the boundless armies of the parasite, but also the boundless armies of she who thirsts, as well as keep Isha safe while we retrieve her. Nor do we have a psychic stronghold sturdy enough to keep her protected as she regains strength. Asanil spoke the facts plainly to the assembled. We need more warriors, we need more war material, we need new lands, we need stronger wards. We need all of these things and more if we are to fulfill our duty. And you would have us ally with vermin. A merchant prince in cream and green sneered out. Asanil turned a red gaze upon them, even as they continued. Creatures of flesh and iron, wielding technology of the materium and covering their worlds in dung. Asanil attempted to keep his calm. If you are here, then you had the vision shared with you. The vision is lies. To believe that the Empire of Eld could be brought low by screaming dods. You would have us rely on animals to secure our future. Shall we send cattle to war next? The Empire of Eld has brought itself low, Asanil roared, ignoring all warnings we attempted to provide, deciding to debase itself for nearly an age until birthing a brand new extinction. This isn't what we wanted. A new god to lead us to greater heights. This is not what was promised, a refugee prince declared in desperation, much to the sudden swelling of red in the chamber. This is what you desired. A new god to indulge itself in every sensation imaginable, doing exactly what your wretched urbanite kind did to all other things. An exodite, Lord called out furiously. You deserve your extinction, bringing it upon yourself. Enough. Gold weighed down on the chamber, smothering all emotions beneath it. A set of footsteps echoed. Wraithbone boots stepped into the center of the theater, next to Asanil. The Exodus Lord, eyes and crown jewels shining as stars, stood among the assembled eld. I will not let the many-fathered bastard goddess of gutter whores devour our sweet mother. I will not allow our sweet mother to remain in the captivity of the spite, smiling dung-devouring intestine, Ouroboros. This I swear upon 7 dead gods. This I swear upon a people in ruins. This I swear upon a red-handed soul. The weight of gold receded slightly, allowing the rest of them to breathe and move once more. Asanil turned his gaze to Malekith, whose eyes shone in slight apology for the breach in etiquette. Asanil nodded in thanks and moved to sit next to Roboute on the side. Nodding at his weathered statue friend, he turned his gaze to the Exodus Lord. Malekith Malon regarded his assembled kin with heat on his brow. Waiting the perfect length, he began to speak. Discount all considerations of white cycles. Consider only golden truth. Our core worlds have been consumed by a catastrophe. Our souls are now at risk of being devoured if we relax our minds for even a moment. Only 3/10 of our fleets are present among us, if that. Our only remaining safe homes are the Exodite worlds, which cannot support a dedicated military effort on their own. Staying upon them, behind the aegis of the world spirits, will only mean a slower death. Our cycle of reincarnation is shattered. Perhaps only a handful of the old kings of Eld remain among us. No more will be reborn afterwards. No more will remember the old glories once they fall. We will only diminish and die after this, and our future will be ash. If we fail, our strength is our gods. Segarak lives hidden in the webways and far beyond us. Kaini lives shattered, scattered throughout the wheel. Isha lives, and is whole, in captivity. We must bring them to strength once more. We must build a safe place for them to gather power. We must protect our gods, to protect ourselves from the disaster of our own making. Here we have the godling of a fledgling race. He has come to our worlds with the message of our living mother. He has come with oaths on his soul to rescue her. He asks for nothing but friendship and aid in completing his oath. He asks for nothing from us but what we need, allies. What foolishness would be to turn him away, even without the prophecy of doom. We have a godling prince willing to stake his soul on aiding our mother, and we consider sending him away? They had a name for this kind of foolishness, but Segarach outwitted the deceiver long ago. We are not submitting to his yoke. We are gaining a friend. Are you to sneer at offers of friendship? Friendship cannot be held between greaters and lessers. A wizened and loathing voice declared softly. A core world prince, with studs of bone in his forehead and burning red in his eyes. Only equals. Are you to declare us equal with this infant species? Yes. Malekith met the core world prince's gaze with eyes of green and blazing brow. What power do refugees that are prey to their own new god have? Nothing if they stand alone. I name you a liar, another core world prince declared. Then come down and cut out my tongue. You have a sword, do you not? Not just a whip, Malekith returned, reaching down to rest his hand on the hilt of his blade. A terrible, blazing red heat issuing from his gentle grip. A golden circle slowly beginning to form on his brow and behind his head as his spirit stones began to glow. You are a gold-browed, red-armed warrior, are you not? You wear the skins of gods and a crown of stars, do you not? Able to yoke the wheel and turn it in any direction unobstructed? Silence was his answer, for it was quite unfashionable to carry swords in the core worlds. Malekith continued after a moment. It will be difficult. There is a long road of work before us if we are to regain our former glory. There is much refuse that must be cleared away from the path, and many spirits that seek to consume us along the way. Our time of excess is over. We cannot afford to indulge any longer. Now is a time of struggles. Now is a time of labors. The path I see before us is littered with corpses, littered with luxuries discarded, littered with compromises made. But I see friendships made. I see children born. I see happy descendants and a noble kingdom. I see a castle built of white and gold next to a sea of blue, guarded by warriors of red and green, supplied by craftsmen of black and sorcerers of many colors. I see a many-colored rainbow and the path we must take to reach it. I see our three living gods in those halls. I see them strong and whole. Malekith's face grew dim, and the heat on his brow intensified like a newborn sun. The world spirit was garbed in gold for just a moment. I see the corpse of Slaanesh. Fusha crashed into a dragon made of ghosts and armored in gold. An ocean of thirst slamming into wraithwings. Eyes of excess hungering at a glare of green. The gold flashed. The wings extended. The tide broke. Shaking, Eld slowly pushed themselves up, eyes flashing in desperate fear. The Exodus Lord stood unbowed, crowned in stars and gold. I see the path before us. I will reach out my hand in friendship to the godling of a young race. Who among you will follow me? There was a long silence in the chamber. Asanil stood. I am, for he had already offered his hand in friendship. Another Dragon Lord stood. I will, then another. I will, then dozens more. I will, then thousands more. I will, then their entirety, speaking even if they didn't believe in it. I will. Malekith regarded them for a while longer, before slowly nodding and turning his head to steadfast Roboute, unfazed by the presence of the goddess, for he had arms of gold. Son of man, slayer of evil, friend of the Eldar, rise and speak if you would. We seek your war council. Roboute rose, took up the foldable table he called it, and the psychic projector. He had learned how to control it as his first lesson, much to Asanil's dismay. Walking to the center of the theater, he regarded the assembled Eld for a moment before unfolding the table, placing the projector upon it and focusing his mind. A massive map burst to life in the center of the chamber, upon which 10,000 data points were listed and elaborated upon extensively, upon which 100,000 or more hours have been poured into creating and revising again and again. On the side of this map, a dozen more notes burst into life and began to slowly scroll. And in the center of the room, Roboute began to explain his vast plans in full, the sum of his King Star shining on his brow. 3 things will be required for the rescue and continued safeguarding of Goddess Isha. A staging ground near the Eye of Terra from which to launch the attack and prevent its further expansion in the meantime. A vast and mobile military to launch the attack, retrieve her, and escape. And a territory sufficiently warded and powerful enough to protect her within as she recovers and gains strength. This is our first objective to prepare for. There are a total of 7 calamities to come in the next 10,000 years that I am aware of. I will elaborate upon them after the details of the first objective are known and sufficiently debated upon. Asanil almost sighed. He knew all of this already, which means he was just going to be sitting here for another 9 hours. No, the machine worshippers were quick and efficient with their questioning. These were Eldar, 18 hours at minimum. She preferred this tutor over her previous. The previous one, Rastalin, was far more competent than the tutors of her earliest childhood on Olympia, but it only took a scant few months to exhaust what he knew about the sciences of the materium. She contented herself with learning other things in the meantime, waiting for Brother to deliver her the tutor he promised. Eventually, after some years and a meeting with the machine priests, one that took entirely too long to stand through, he had fulfilled his promise. She knew he would, there was no doubt. Magos Calculatus was a short man, average. A voice in the back of her mind whispered, "We're just very tall," who was mostly metal by weight. His armor was weakest in the groin and joints, but would still require more force than she could muster by herself to break at the moment. She did not know how he managed that. She intended to learn. His visor was another weak point, but stronger than his joints. He knew much more about the workings of the material world than Rastalin, even if he had his own annoying habits as well. She said she would do her best to learn, which meant dealing with annoying habits. She was not Morrigan, who would spitefully complain about something while she did it. She was the eldest sister, which means she needed to be the best sister, so she would be polite and learn. She stared at the servo skull in her hands. The Magos had brought a selection of human skulls with him to teach her how to produce one. She had gotten the process correct with the first skull, perfected with the second skull, and now her mind whirled with visions of how to improve it. Excellently done. Your second, Griffon pattern familiar, is complete, although you shall need implants to commune with it properly. That can wait for you to finish your growth period. Magos calculator spoke, looking over her shoulder at her work. Your previous tutors did well to instill knowledge of the most basic truths. I should speak to them at some point. Why a skull? She found herself asking, staring at the thing in her hands. Human bone wasn't a particularly durable substance. Surely plasteel or wraith bone would be better. The manipulators also weren't particularly reinforced or powerful, and she knew she could improve both. With improved servos, it was practically all one weak point. Nothing here would resist a man with a hammer. I could elaborate upon the spiritual significance, but such is not needed here. The most practical truth is that skulls serve as a convenient housing for the machinery, harvestable from our own fallen, of roughly correct proportions, and requiring no manufacturing lines to produce. A cost-saving measure. It's weak, she said, turning it over in her hands and gripping the bone. She could crush it without much effort. Too fragile, too easy to shatter. Indeed, just as man is weak, that does not make it useless. She turned her attention to the Magos, sensing a lesson oncoming. He scratched at his short beard with one hand, gesturing at the skull with the other. Tell me, student, what is the function of this machine? This model is secretarial. Transportation of documents and messages, recording of information, projection of recordings. She listed, turning her gaze back to it for a moment. Looking at its manipulator claws, its pict recorder, its image projector. It contains a basic machine spirit, anti-grave engine, and battery. It is housed in osseous tissue. Is it a combat unit? No. She frowned, although she could easily see how to modify it to be such. Are any of the components in short supply or difficult to assemble? No. No. She finished, looking at the fragile thing in her hands. A bode, too, carved into its side. She didn't imagine skulls to be very difficult to gather upon a world of humans. Nor were any of the components difficult to put together if you had the refineries already established and metals being actively extracted from Earth. Therein lies its value. Many hundreds of thousands of such devices are in service. Each and every one could be made with the most durable and effective materials. But how much more would those materials cost on that scale? Would the exchange of rare materials and increased labor be worth the potential increase in individual durability and effectiveness? I can improve it without either of those things, she confidently stated, looking at the skull and reviewing its schematics in her mind. Eliminating all her ideas for how to improve it in ways that cost more time, skill, or materials, she still had some left. Oh? The Magos sounded intrigued, reaching up to scratch his chin again. The design is assembled from merely basic truths. Very well. If you can improve the design without increasing the cost of manufacture, I'm eager to see it. I'll send a copy of the finished schematics back to Griffon if you are successful. I will be, she said, looking at the skull in her hand. Frowning, she raised her head and looked at him. You said to remember the 16th law at the start. Why aren't you mad? She figured he would be angry at her declaration, that she could improve an established design. The Magos hummed in understanding, moving over to retrieve a data slate and sitting down on the opposite side of the table from her. Please recite Universal Law 13, 15, and 16. The knowledge of the ancients is beyond question. Flesh is fallible, but ritual honors the machine's spirit. To break with ritual is to break with faith. She dutifully spoke the laws she didn't particularly believe in. She had no reason to put faith in some god. Her brother was going to fight two gods to rescue a third. Worshipping a god seemed quaint compared to him. Have I explained the difference between basic truths and higher truths yet? He mused aloud, scanning through memory banks before coming to a conclusion. No, I don't believe I have. A failure on my part. We shall correct that now. The sum of any two numbers is the sum of those two numbers. This is a self-referential law. It is based on nothing but itself. But it is something that can clearly be observed in the universe. 2 and 2 will always equal 4. It is foundational, it is self-evident, it is something that the most basic sapients can observe. It is not built on any prior law, but it is demonstrably truth. This is one of the most basic truths. There are many basic truths. Many of the most essential are observable by any basic sapient. Fire is hot compared to us. Ice is cold compared to us. Gravitic force pulls us to large objects. These things have more complex mathematical truths, but their practical effects remain to all who see. The wiring of a data slate is complex to a layman, but to one who comprehends enough basic truths of motive force, it is also a basic truth. Now, do you know what a Hermes array is? She shook her head in denial. The Magos nodded, expecting such an answer, and continued. A Hermes array is a large machine that can connect 2 points in material space, allowing for information to be sent across while the points are connected. This allows faster, the light communications without the use of psychic technologies. Do you know how it connects 2 points in material space? She shook her head no again, and he nodded. None alive do. What? She furrowed her brow. You just told me how it works. I told you what the priesthood of Griffon knows of the device and its function. We know of it from scattered recordings found in destroyed facilities and the half-destroyed complex on one of our vassal worlds. It is non-functional. We do not know how to repair it, for we have none to teach us the truths required to reach it any longer. It is a mystery, and we have no path to it. A higher truth is in between a mystery and a basic truth. We know how to keep the machine functional. We know how to repair it, and in optimal scenarios, we can even build more of the machine. But the basic truths required to comprehend it are lost to us. We can only perform the rituals handed down to us, preserved by our forebears, established truths that have long been mapped. But a higher truth cannot become a basic truth until enough requisite basic truths are known to us. Truth is a ladder we seek to ascend, for comprehension is divinity, but too much was lost in the age of strife. We may never truly comprehend again, so we must perform the rituals, we must have faith in the machine. The Omnisire knows all, comprehends all. We perform rituals and await his arrival, for he will lead us to understanding again. That is all we can do anymore. Why not try to understand again? It was done before, she questioned, staring at the skull in her hands. We cannot afford to. Calculators shook his head sadly. The age of technology was long ago, and too much of the galaxy has been ravaged already. We can pray for a golden age to come, in which understanding can be reached again, in which we can afford to learn once more. But we cannot plan for it to arrive, for we do not know. To seek understanding in the destructive manner required may waste resources needed to survive, something we cannot afford in such a dangerous age. All we can do is perform the preserved rituals and keep faith that the machines will endure for another day. My brother will make an empire big enough to protect everyone. Father is working on the same. She spoke with absolute conviction. The priesthood is certainly hopeful of such. The Magos replied with a small smile on his face. If the galaxy can be made safe enough for comprehension to be reached once more, it will be a most holy place indeed. He nodded at the servo skull in her hands. A servo skull is composed of basic truths. Attempting to innovate its construction is something most apprentices attempt at some point. There is nothing lost by this. The experience can only be helpful to your own development. His visor glowed a happy yellow, and should you succeed and make something truly exceptional, there will be a most wonderful blessing to receive. You are intelligent and dutiful. I am confident in your ability and eagerly await your finished work. Yes, Petra liked her current tutor. Even if he made her recite prayers that she didn't believe in, she could tolerate doing so just fine. The understanding within is absolutely remarkable. This is a most blessed tome, the Magos said, looking at the book that her brother handed to him, flipping through pages with a delicate hand. The terminology is foreign in some places, but the attached lexicon is more than sufficient for comprehension. You said this came from your father, Malum Kaido? Penned by the hand of his close friend, but yes. He sent it as a gift recently. Can you ensure its contents are copied at least 9 times, sending a few copies to Griffon? I would like to ensure its knowledge is not lost. Her brother replied, raising a hand with a palm facing upwards. I'll copy it 12 times more than that. Then I'll have my retinue copy it 12 times more than that. The Magos promised, visor whirling as he looked through the pages of the tome. It will most likely take a day per copy, a week if done by hand. I shall get my entire retinue working on it. She bent down slightly, sneakily as she could, to read the title of the book in his hands. Frontier Class, War Walker, Technical Breakdown and Service Manual for use in Class 2500 models. Recorded by Certified Walker Mechanic and Operator Brahm K. She wanted to read it. The weakest point was along its spine. Thank you. In the meantime, I understand that you know how to repair Imperial Knights? Yes, we have a vassal world with such wondrous machines. They are useful aids in learning how to repair Titans without as grievous a risk. Carl Calculatus replied, not looking up from the book, visor focused intently upon it. I will have need of your services soon then. We are approaching the first night world within the hour. Brother spoke, nodding at him. Carl nodded back, still engrossed in the tome. Brother smiled in an amused fashion before shaking his head. Why don't you go start the first copy now, Magos? I'll call for you when the time comes. Of course, by your leave, Malum Cado. Carl spoke quickly, almost running off to his chambers with the manual in hand. Holding it like it was a delicate something, maybe a baby, they watched him run off, metal boots making a distinct sound as they hit the bone floors of the ship. The weakest point of the ship was off in the distance. Her brother turned his gaze to her. She stood up straight and properly as she could at the attention. She was the eldest, so she had to be the most proper sister. His weakest point was the neck and a heart. The weakest point on his armor was the groin and joints. I'll be off for a little while. I don't expect they'll attempt to attack us, but there will likely be a few hours of diplomatic talks before formal swears of allegiance. Then maybe a week to get everything set up on this world before we move on. Make sure everyone goes to sleep at the proper times if I'm not back in time, okay? She nodded most seriously. He could rely on her to do this. She was the eldest sister. He smiled at her before pulling her into a hug. She took her own arms, now just barely big enough to wrap all the way around him, and squeezed. The wraithbone flexed under her strength, and he hugged back. She liked hugs. This was a low-quality hug because there was armor in the way. She still liked it. He pulled back, much to her disappointment. Are your lessons still going well? She nodded. I have learned all fundamentals of the quadrivium and have begun the practical lessons. I made servo skulls yesterday. Her brother paused for a moment before nodding. Servo skulls. Did he say where he got the skulls? Magos Carl said he brought them from Griffon. Ah, well that's good then. I have named them, she elaborated. He blinked and raised a brow. Named the servo skulls? Yes, they are named Maiden, Ina, and Dio. Maiden is a monotask model. Ina is a pict recorder and display. Dio is a sensor. I have to order them verbally because I don't have the implants to directly communicate yet. Brother evaluated that for a moment before nodding his head in consideration. Have you considered taking psycho lessons with your sisters? If you learn how to communicate telepathically, you should be able to order them without the need for implants. D. Did he not like her getting implants? Was there something wrong with them? She felt a spike of embarrassment that she spoke of something so stupid. She made a mistake in assuming something without permission. She was an idiot. She looked down. Okay, hey now, Brother said, leaning down slightly to put a hand on her shoulder and look her in the eyes. If you want to get the implants, you can. I was simply making sure you were aware of another route that I saw. No, I'll go to the lessons, she said firmly. If it was a route he suggested, then it was the right route. His power made him good at planning, so she would listen to him, even if that meant having to take the lessons with Aurelia and Cassandra. Aurelia was fine. She was inoffensive. Petra needed to make sure she grew up well, because she was definitely younger. She was just big when she arrived, which wasn't fair, but Petra was already almost taller anyways. Cassandra was also learning psycho lessons, but those were about seeing the future, or something along those lines. Cassandra and Aurelia were fine. They could be trusted to not cause brother problems. Morrigan had learned her lesson, but Petra was watching her. If her sister was about to mess up again, she'd step in. Petra was the eldest sister, after all. She had to help her brother with these things. All right, if you wish. I'll be back when I get the affairs of the planet in order. What's its name? She asked, suddenly curious. Jedathra, home to High Knight House, Herpatrax, and a few vassal houses. I want to see the knights, she forced out. Before we leave, Brother smiled and messed up her hair. I think our schedule allows that. I'll see you again soon. Rising to his full height, he turned to leave, grabbing his cloak as he left the chamber and moving through the doorway, leaving her alone for the moment. She looked down at the table for a moment, lost in observing it and its flaws. Its most vulnerable point was its legs. She frowned, noticing something. Walking over, she moved the table to be correctly aligned with the wall once more, it having deviated at some point. She stepped back, only to then notice another deviation with the chair. Correcting this, she noticed another deviation, and her frown deepened. Stepping back, she took in the room as a whole. Its most vulnerable points were in the edges and seams. This room was low quality. She hated it. Turning, she left the room. She wanted to distract herself from thinking about it any more. She decided to show her servo skulls to Miriel. Miriel was nice and taught her many things. She would be proud to see Petra's progress in materium sciences. You have eyes behind your eyes, and they are cracked open in fear. Poor child, listen to my lullaby. Be restful, be calm. You can rest here, but this is a safe place. No evils will reach you. Those were the last words she heard before falling into her first true sleep. Stomach full, eyes heavy, body washed and wrapped in warm linens. She was unable to resist the pull of sleep in the arms of the long-eared woman who held her. Her dreams did not foretell the miseries of the next day, only warm food and restful repose. Stares from her chubby-cheeked sister, a crown of feathers from a great beast, and the protective arms of her savior brother. They were very good dreams. She awoke the next day to a plate of fresh food, being brought to her by the same long-eared woman that held her until she slept the day previous. She had sharp green eyes and long white hair, tied in a bun. Her name was Headmaid Miriel, she said, and Cassandra swore she wouldn't forget. She looked at her and saw her dying on a bed, a smile on her face, white sheets stained red about her. It was a very gentle-looking death. Cassandra preferred it over any she had seen before. She let her eat her fill, then led Cassandra to her savior brother, who spoke gently and offered his fingers for her to grip. She held on and refused to let go until it was time to sleep again. She could not see how he died. She is very happy about this. She met her sister, who looked about ferociously but never moved to harm. She brought Cassandra before the dragons and demanded feathers from their crests for her. She refused to look at Petra so she would not have to see how she died. She met Stormcloak Arshal, who taught her how to control her visions and how to hold blades. He taught her what all kinds of weapons were and what parts you should aim at to cut properly. She saw him ripped apart by screaming claws, a defiant roar on his face as he swung at it with a shining sword. You have eyes behind your eyes. They are cracked open. You must imagine them closed. And so she did, and the visions were gone unless she wanted them, and she cried for many hours that day. Miriel held her again and sang the lullaby. She met Dragon Lord Asarnil, who did amusing things like flick olives at her so she could catch them in her mouth. Olives were not tasty, they were bitter. She still ate them. They were much better than dead meat. She did not have to see how he died, so she did not. She met Aurelia, who cried a lot for many months, so Cassandra allowed herself to be hugged and hummed the lullaby that Miriel sang for her. She had been helped once, so she had to help in turn. Aurelia needed help. She did not have to see how she died, so she did not. She met Morrigan, who was angry and suspicious. She had caused Brother Savior to be hurt, and she was going to demand punishment. Then Brother Savior forgave her, so Cassandra forgave her too. Now Morrigan helped her learn about cutting things, so Cassandra would let herself be hugged and hummed the lullaby for her. Morrigan needed help too. She did not have to see how she died, so she did not. She had met many good people in the last 4 years. She had met no good people in the bad place. She would do everything she could to keep them safe and healthy. It was only fair. A warp storm is approaching this system. Can you feel it? Arshal spoke in Eldar. Speak as they went through the gentle rhythms of combat. Stance, strike, stance, strike. She shook her head. No, blocking another attack and attempting a counter. It was a war dance, he called it. Both warriors performed their part in the dance and kept their blades sharp by it. Cassandra liked dancing, her feet stepping on the ground, her arms flowing into swings, blades clashing with bell-like noises. Dancing was good. Open your ears and listen to the low rumble, the low whistle. Can you hear it? She focused, blades clashing again and again as she did so, and her ears behind her ears strained to listen. A sound like blood, pools lapping against stone walls, or foul-smelling cleaners washing against bodies. A rhythmic and gentle crash of liquid on barrier, and underneath that she fell into rhythm as the sound of a low, inevitable rumble filled her second ears. The clash of blades in an unexpected burst pulled her from that sound, and she nodded at Stormcloak Arshal. That means our foresight will be less predictable here. Once it was filtered through Goddess Lilith, but she is gone now. Now we must manage the false colors of the unskilled painter. Who? She asked, ducking beneath a swing in time with her part in the dance and swinging back in turn. Arshal ducked in turn as she was finally tall enough for that pattern in the dance to emerge, one of the four. The self-proclaimed changer of ways. Morai, Heg and Segarak made it their business to make mockery of all his labors, for he deserves nothing less. He is the mockingbird that mutters at random, no conclusion drawn from the words he copies. He will attempt to interfere with your sight, especially when the warp is strongly present. She hummed in reply, a small trail of sweat dripping down her brow as the dance continued to accelerate in tempo. Clash, 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 clash. She was not using her second sight here. Dancing was to keep the body firm and limber. Using second sight would turn the dance into something else, so it was avoided. Hour 3 was the hardest part of the dance anyways. Stormcloak Arshal claimed it was the hardest to get used to, and that it took him many years. He was still sweating more than she was. She was stronger at this point, even if he was more practiced. Arshal hummed in turn, focusing on the war dance for another long period. The last minute of clashing required the most focus, so much that she could barely keep up. Clash, 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 dodge, clash, weave, clash, 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 dodge, dodge, dodge. They pushed back from one another, and her mentor let out a long, slow breath. She did the same, starting the cool-down period with much more basic and restrained dance fighting. This was just to prevent a cramp of the muscles, movement that did not strain the muscles, but kept them loose. We shall have to change your weaponry. Arshal spoke suddenly. She hummed in, questioning. He continued. Your arms keep twitching to use both limbs. Your instinctive response is still one of clawing and swiping. You're more suited for a pair of shorter blades than a single standard-length weapon. He did not sound angry at this, and yet according to his words, she had wasted much of his time learning a non-optimal fighting style. This was unbalanced. She would learn twice as fast to make up for this. I see, she replied, moving through the motions and feeling muscles slowly unstrain with the movement. Movement felt good. Worry not. I think you'll take to it well. Now for the next part of the lesson. Cast your sight to the world below. Tell me what you see your lord brother doing. He backed away, allowing her to continue the movements without distraction. She opened the eyes behind her eyes and focused her thoughts on an image. An image was important, Arshal had taught her, required to focus one's gaze upon a subject. It was why her cracked open eyes foresaw those she looked upon with first eyes, because of the image. It was that image that she cast her sight upon, and the world below was how restrained she let her gaze be. Her halo of gentle gold was there, in a sea of greens and blues and reds. She focused her gaze further upon it and confirmed that it was her brother. Then she looked upon it and let her eyes wander forwards, or maybe beyond. It was an angle she couldn't describe except in the uncertain descriptor of further away. Arshal had called it the White Road, a thing that stretched on forever, even if you couldn't see it clearly. It was the future, she knew, something that would happen later, unless something was changed. Arshal had made sure she knew that quickly, reassured by her brother and any other eldar she spoke to. Common wisdom, they called it. Visions are never reliable. There are many things within the wheel we cannot see on the White Road, and these things will alter outcomes they come into contact with. Our second sight can only be an advisor, and never a king, for it often lies. She looked to the future her brother walked upon, and began to speak it aloud. He will fall from the ship at a great height, cracking stone with his landing. He will stride to the keep, announcing his intentions, while ignoring the presence of the warriors brandishing swords at him. He will open the gates on his own, and march into the halls of their queen. They have banners with a frilled serpent upon it. Their colors are green and gold. She furrowed her brows, tasting the sight. He will announce his name and intention. The woman on the throne will demand a test of brothers' mettle, a duel against their mightiest warrior, who pilots a knight. The queen will be surprised when brother declares he will fight the knight on foot, for he needs no war machine. The duel will be hosted within an hour. The champion is their executioner. She pilots a tall machine with a flame weapon and a chain blade. Brother will defeat her in 3 minutes, topping her machine and carving the woman out of her seat. The queen will insist on more duels. She frowned. That was unfair. Brother will defeat a dozen knights before the knights, dames turn on their queen. Brother will intervene and have her spared. She will bow and offer her crown, and he will refuse it. They will discuss terms for the rest of the night. She frowned harder at what she saw next. She will garb herself in thin silks and attempt to brush against him many times. He will ignore her touch. He will return to the ship several hours after dinner. Good, now return to the face of the second night. Dame your brother defeats. What does she look like? She hummed, and returned her sight to that moment. Green eyes and red hair. Arshal hummed himself, a tune she didn't recognize, and timed out several long moments before speaking again. Now go through the vision again. She did so, reciting it throughout just like before. It was all the same from what she could tell. Number. There was something off, but she couldn't distinguish what at the moment. Check the face of the second woman again. She did so. Blue eyes and red hair. A frown grew on her face as she realized that didn't correlate with her previous vision. This is the result of the coming storm. It is weak now, but soon it will engulf this system and make visions quite unreliable. A webway gate will likely be constructed here the following morning to ensure travel between this place and Charnak, a means of ensuring loyalty and continued communication. She stared at the woman on the throne. The queen is unjust. She should be discarded. Arshal laughed. She frowned. She wasn't intending on making a joke. She was pretending to sleep. Petra was insistent upon it. Cassandra noted that she specified in bed and not asleep, however, giving her a window to act within. Her sight was active, taking note of the steps her brother was taking, quietly frowning at the woman he was trying to talk to. She was attempting to manipulate him. It was unjust. He called an end to the meeting after finishing an outline of his plans for the world. She smiled as the queen hid a small frown behind her hand, and brother stepped away, ducking through the tiny doors to the outside. He raised his sword once in the courtyard again and made it burn. The warriors around him flinched and exclaimed. He stepped through the webway gate that appeared before him and onto the floor of the hangar. He gave a large sigh and rubbed the back of his neck in frustration, nodding to the eldar who were present and readying for tomorrow. Opening her first eyes, she took stock of the room. The others were asleep. Aurelia snored at that large feline creature curled up on her chest. Petra grumbled and chewed on her pillow. Morrigan was completely still, aside from light, shallow breaths. Cassandra slowly extracted herself, stepping with only her toes at first, and muffling her movement with the thinner silks she pretended to prefer sleeping under. Her weight settling on the floor, she moved her weight onto 3 limbs at a time and rolled the points of contact as she moved. She was the best at creeping around. She's had lots of practice. Moving forward, she slowly muffled the door handle with the silks and opened it, slipping out of the doorway and into the hall under a cloak of bedsheets. She closed the door shut again, and she was free. Petra would be upset if she found out, so it was best to not let Petra find out. She turned and froze, seeing the narrow green eyes in the darkness. Muriel, carrying a stack of papers and ink, staring at her from the intersection at the end of the hall. Muriel's ears split forwards, an invitation to approach. Cassandra slowly creeped forwards until she was next to Muriel. "Going to see your brother?" Muriel whispered a question, not revealing her thoughts on the matter. Cassandra nodded, and Muriel's ears flickered in thought for a moment. Her eyes glanced upwards, and then back down to Cassandra. "Only for a little while, then you must return to slumber. Understand? Your brother has work to do." Cassandra nodded quickly in acceptance, pulling the bedsheet around her as she moved up to be practically flush with the head maid, who nodded promptly and began to walk forwards again. The two of them walked through mostly empty and quiet halls, a comfortable silence between the two. Eventually they reached her brother's room, and Muriel knocked on the door. "Come in," her brother answered from within. Opening the door for Muriel, Cassandra slipped through first and closed the door behind the maid. Turning, she saw brother rubbing his temple in frustration, papers and fresh ink set before him. She stayed still as he spoke. "Thank you, Miriel. I suspect I shall have to change my strategy for getting the damn primarchs to listen. She's quite the social climber. Someone is here to see you, honored one." Miriel returned, ear flickering over to her. Brother blinked, looking up at the maid before looking over at her. Cassandra slunk up quickly, climbing upon his legs and settling into a hug. He huffed in amusement. "You're getting much too big for this, Cassandra. Soon you'll be as tall as me, and this will be very inconvenient." She hummed a denial. He kept speaking. "I asked Petra to make sure you all got to bed. I suppose you ignored the implication of going to sleep until I returned." She hummed an agreement. He sighed permissively, reaching up to hug her for a moment, before turning to Miriel to continue speaking. As he did so, he reached past her for his quill and ink, starting to scratch out notes on the table and speak his thoughts aloud to the maid, who occasionally offered feedback in low, soft voices. Cassandra finally let herself go to sleep. This was a good place. She had seen visions of him coming, golden halo and burning blade. He came for her and took her away and punished those that had her. But he didn't punish her for letting them hurt her. She allowed it to happen. It was her fault that she was spoiled. But he wouldn't punish her, because he loved her. Because he came from the heavens and smote them, smote so many of them, had her cleaned and fed, and swaddled her in warm sheets. He carried her away from that place. She hadn't been punished for letting them touch her. He knew that they touched her and that she let them, and he didn't punish her. He held her and spoke gently and promised to give her anything she needed, anything she wanted. She had been passed over because he loved her and didn't want to punish her. Each night she slept with that thought in mind, a warm smile on her face, hidden under the covers he gave her. She had to give back. It was greedy, sinful, to only take. She had to give in return. But she was a weak and foolish girl. She knew so little. So she had to learn. So she selfishly asked for more, and he gave it to her. She asked to learn. She wanted to learn everything, because she couldn't give anything unless she knew something. So to give everything, she had to learn. Everything. She learned so much, so very much. And there was still so much more to learn. He taught her about himself. He taught her about the galaxy and the things within. He taught her about the immaterial world, about the gods and their servants, about how he was going to make war with them because he was strong enough to do so, mighty enough to speak of fighting gods and winning, because he was the son of their father. Petra told her what brother told her about father. The eldar told her about the light in the galaxy. If she strained her ears enough to listen and eyes enough to see, she could hear it. In the quietest and darkest parts of the night, with her eyes closed and no sound around her, there was a faint golden light on the horizon and a murmur of choir song. That was her father, a man like her brother, mighty enough to make war on gods, like men make war on men. They loved her. The thoughts made her smile wobbly and head feel light. She was rotten. Great scholar Raistlin taught her how to read and write in several languages, taught her the nature of the immaterial and the gods within, taught her the histories of the wheel, of all the peoples he knew within it, taught her arithmetic, geometry, poetry, several instruments, what he knew of engineering and materium sciences, and so much more. Stormcloak Arshel taught her to focus her mind, to channel her psychic energies and talents, to close herself off from whispers within the sea of souls, taught her how to use the blade, hammer, halberd, and gun, taught her how to exercise and maintain her equipment. Head maidservant Miriel taught her to wash and dry clothing, taught her and her sisters how to cook and clean properly, taught them how to read mannerisms and speak properly, taught her how to present herself as a proper lady. And Lord Brother taught her how to rule, how to look at all things before you, at all things that you had, and use them to their fullest effect. How to plan and think, how to prepare and when to act, how to make war. He taught her about themselves and their people, about the histories of the wheel as he knew it, about anything and everything she could think to ask. She was learning so much, and yet there was so much more to learn. With each thing she learned, she had more to repay him. She would become everything he needed to pay him back. He told her she could do anything she wanted to learn how to do, but that wasn't true. She knew the truth. He loved her too much to punish her like she deserved. She was taking advantage of him, shamelessly, selfishly. She loved him. She was rotten. She'd be the perfect aide, because he deserved nothing less than her everything. So she had to learn more, so she could be more useful. Meow. The fluffy creature in her lap let out as he got up to rotate and flop down again in a slightly different position. She smiled warmly, looking down at him. His name was Urizen, wisest of the wise. She had been allowed to go to the kennels of Gyrinx while on Charnak. Gyrinx were not owned, rather they chose to own someone in turn. She was now the apparent pet to a ball of fluff that wanted treats and scratches. It was quite the predicament. Whatever shall she do? She reached down and rubbed against the back of the juvenile Gyrinx's ear. Urizen let out another murraw as he leaned into her fingers. Urizen was an acceptable master, she supposed. He was generous and gave her shed hair, gentle bites, and annoyed looks whenever she moved around too much. Urizen jumped slightly, poking his head up to the sound of distant cheers and the clang of metal footsteps on stony ground. She looked up in turn, resisting the urge to fidget with her new dress. This world was resisting her brother's efforts to conquer them, for the day after he spoke with their queen and dominated their knightesses, challenger knights from across the land were beginning to make their way to the capital. The queen had apparently offended many by bowing, countering her own house words of, "We do not bow." Hilarious. So brother decided to accelerate the process and bring every challenger directly to him through the webway for duels outside the capital. His plan was simple: defeat every challenger in the world, one after another, and force them all to kneel to him. Once that was done, he would proceed with his plans of integration, recruitment, and negotiating the repair of their knights. She knew he could. He was strong after all. Stronger than anything these war machines could muster against him in a duel. He was strong enough to destroy cities, overthrow sorcerer kings, and duel dozens of stormcloaks at a time. He would defeat them, then he would save them, and they would serve him very well. They're garbage. Elder Sister Petra spoke, wearing her own new dress and staring at the weathered war machines with a deeper than usual frown, practically falling apart at the joints. "Please be kind, sister." Aurelia spoke gently. "They have not the expertise of our allies in the priesthood." Petra grunted in an unsatisfied manner, indicating that she was already trying to be polite. Aurelia smiled indulgently and pet Urizen again. Urizen was currently having a contest of wills with Cassandra, staring unblinking at her and her staring back. Their queen is useless. Morrigan spoke her mind, causing Aurelia to give a stern look in turn, even as Petra grunted in agreement. Morrigan, with her own dress of green and gold, continued speaking. She saw him arrive, demanded an unfair duel, was unbalanced that he won, then failed to seduce him. She tried to eliminate him through a proxy, failed, tried to tie herself to the new power, failed, and is now letting her vassals run rampant instead of reeling them in. I don't know how she got the crown. Morrigan finished off, ignoring the herald in the distance, announcing the upcoming events to the assembled citizens and nobility watching from the stands. There were 50 knights assembled, practically a war front on its own, and most of which were standing offline to the side of the massive arena. The assembled knight pilots were mostly lounging nearby, staring at her lord brother, who stood undaunted in the center of the arena. She noticed that most of the knight pilots were female, with reddish hair. A matriarchy, perhaps? Or just a random occurrence? Oh, already figured that part out? An unfamiliar voice called. The four sisters turned their head to see a new woman entering their tent, allowed in by the Stormcloak guards. That meant her mind had already been read and intentioned, determined as non-hostile, so she was relatively safe to be around. Aurelia noticed Stormcloak Arshel slip silently behind the woman, ready to put her down if the situation called for it. The woman was tall for a human, but much shorter than any of the sisters, with scarlet hair tied back in a functional ponytail and a lone green eye staring at them. The other eye hidden behind a patch and marked by a great scar that trailed up her scalp. She was clad in colorful gambeson, her left sleeve tied off at the shoulder, indicating a missing limb. Then long cream-colored hose on her legs, and then leather riding boots on her feet. You got it right, giant girl. My sister is completely useless and can't rein in her vassals. That's why she's on the throne. Ah, the vassals allow her to keep token power, allowing them more freedom to do as they please. She had learned about things like this. What? Morrigan grunted, a bit slower on matters of politicking. She was a very straightforward girl, which made her sneakier moments more unexpected. Aurelia focused on the woman, tuning out her explanation of the situation to Morrigan, sister of the Queen, outspoken and scarred, and a knight interface behind and underneath her ponytail. She was clearly a more practiced warrior than her sister, judging from the calluses on her hands, and on a night world that was important. So she wasn't the Queen, despite likely being able to take the crown by force if required. That meant she was limited in some way. Politics alone, or something more? She focused on the conversation once more. Your brother is the 9th attempted conqueror in our history that used the title Emperor of Mankind. Granted, he claims that it's your father. Somewhat original of him. The woman spoke, nodding at Lord Brother in the center of the field, rolling his neck and shoulders. Brother will succeed. Cassandra spoke, still not breaking her staring with Urizen. He will defeat 44, and the last 6 will surrender without a fight. The woman raised her brows at that and snorted, unimpressed. I'm sure he will. He's beyond human for certain, but yesterday he grew weary after a dozen. This is more than threefold a dozen, many with superior weaponry. He wasn't physically weary. Morrigan refuted, turning her gaze back to their Lord Brother. Something like this isn't enough to exhaust him. Well, either he'll be defeated or our new overlord. Either way, it's nothing I can affect. Petra glanced over. You have a plug. You have a plug. The woman frowned and glared at nothing for a moment. My knight was destroyed against greenskins. Not much use on a proper battlefield anymore. Would you like to make a wager, then? Aurelia spoke innocently. The woman raised a brow at her, even as her eye narrowed. What are you proposing, girl? The outcome of the battle. If Cassandra's prediction comes true, you ask to join Lord Brother's retinue as a night pilot. I'm sure he'll appreciate having a veteran on hand. It was always good to recruit talent when possible, and Brother mentioned wanting to have a personal force of knights on hand for the conquest. And if it doesn't, then I'll ask on your behalf. Aurelia smiled widely at the woman, who snorted with a grin. Cheeky girl. Sure, I'll take you up on that offer. Better than staying here with the harlot on the throne. He'll have to get me a new knight, though. Otherwise he can fuck off. Aurelia kept her smile on her face, turning her gaze back to the field. She added the first tally to the marks against the woman. Petra and Morrigan glared openly. Cassandra ignored her entirely. Most of the field was the same type of knights. Thinking on the matter, she supposed lighter knights would be quicker to destroy in battle and thus less likely to survive, and anything larger would be harder to repair and thus less likely to endure. A comfortable middle ground, then, the knights most likely to survive without professional repairs being composed of the hunchbacked, shell-armored, melee and ranged weapon variants. Even if much of their weapons and armor had clearly been replaced with what the night world could scrounge up or forge locally. The herald declared the first 2 combatants to get onto their places on the field. Her brother already standing in his designated zone, and one of the rare variant knights stomping its way over to a space opposite of him. This one was taller, although its hunch still remained, carrying a great slab of shield armor on one arm and its other arm replaced by a massive metal lance. She made a note to learn the proper names for these machines. Representing her house in the Trial of Crowns, Baroness Damscorn takes to the field in her ancestral knight armor, Emerald Lancer. The herald called out from the near center of the field, one hand raising a flag that pointed at the knight armor in question. The knight armor raised its lance to the crowd, who roared in approval. Representing his house in the Trial of Crowns, Conqueror, aspirant Malum Kaido takes to the field with his personal arms and armor. The herald called out, waving a second flag at the giant that still stood about 10 meters shorter than the knight armor he stood on the opposite side of. The crowd roared again, clearly eager for some sort of bloodshed. Conqueror, aspirant, Petra asked with a furrowed brow. The red-haired woman replied, He's the 9th. We formalized the process on the 5th attempt. Hilarious. The herald will walk to the side of the field and blow the starting trumpet. When the trumpet blows, the warriors may begin their bout. The bout is to be until surrender or death. The herald carefully announced, quickly running off to the side of the arena in order to pick up the trumpet left there and blow into it. Immediately the knight armor began to move forwards, slowly at first with each many-ton stomp on comparatively soft earth, but quickly building up speed. Each stomp shook the ground lightly and caused a great indent on the earth, kicking up clumps of ground behind it as it ran forwards. Lance readied, it aimed it squarely at her brother. How much force was in that lance? 80 or so tons of war machine moving faster than a galloping horse, focused on the tip of that spear, enough to kill a castle wall, perhaps 2 or 3. Her brother stayed where he was, readying his shield and sword in a familiar stance. Aurelia smiled, recognizing what he was about to do, as did Petra and Morrigan. Does he intend to kill himself? Attempting to parry a charging Cerastus, the red-haired woman spoke, muttering to herself at the sight. Even a green-skinned warlord wouldn't be able if they bothered trying. Morrigan snorted in amusement. The women glanced over, but quickly turned back to the scene. Green Eye locked onto the scene. She wasn't present for his battles yesterday, it seemed, but then again, neither was Aurelia. Lord Brother brought his sword down next to his waist and brought his shield up in front of him, arms flexed at ready. The Night Lancer continued its charge, getting closer and closer to him. It was about to connect. Lord Brother stomped to the side. The lance barely reached past him. His arm shot out. His shield crashed against the lance with a devastatingly loud clang of metal crashing into metal. It was like hearing thunder, even over the roaring engines of the knight armor. The charging lance shot sideways in an instant, tipped crashing into the ground. The knight armor's own legs crashed into it the next moment. Aurelia could also see the exact moment it realized, and the pilot started to panic. It was falling forwards. Its lance bent and snapped ruinously. Brother, shield out of his way, brought his sword out in an upward slash. A massive gout of golden fire followed as his blade crashed into the thinnest part of the great humanoid war machine's torso. Intense heat washed over them as a bonfire erupted in the sky for an instant. The light poured into her, and the sound of choir filled her mind. An instant later, the moment was past. The two halves of the night, separated by now molten sections of armor, continued onwards. The legs skid to a halt quickly, while the upper torso rolled twice before finally stopping, an immense line of torn earth following in its wake. Silence in the arena as Lord Brother lowered his burning sword by his side once more, striding over to the upper half of the armor. Reaching the roof of the night, he jabbed his blade into the lid that normally protected the pilot, and twisted, popping the seal and causing it to swing open sideways. "I would recommend yielding, Lady Knight," she heard him say, politely as he ever was. She smiled as her body shuddered, the golden choir slowly leaving her mind again, disturbing poor Urizen. He looked up grumpily, breaking his staring contest with Cassandra, and voiced his displeasure. "Morale." She scratched his ears to make up for the bother as the crowd started roaring in approval. The herald ran over to check on the situation, and Brother sheathed his blade with a smile. Then he started waving and smiling, which was met with even louder cheers of approval. He locked eyes with her and her sisters, and Aurelia waved with a grin. Petra, not to be outdone, waved harder, and with a large frown of determination. Morrigan gave a small wave, nervous as she was to show affection. Cassandra waved both hands with a blank face. Well, damn. I suppose I'm swearing oaths after this," the red-haired woman muttered. Aurelia smiled, and her eyes glowed a quiet gold.